idea that we control the dragons is an illusion.
Now, we've already ridden the House of the Dragon pretty hard this season, but seeing as we are still finding new hidden details and subtle references, we are going to beat this dead dragon a little more.
My apologies, Your Grace, but I cannot allow it. It's too dangerous.
No offense, Luke and Arax. So, let's get going with 10 more hidden details you might have missed in House of the Dragon. And yes, there be spoilers.
It's important. What do you see?
So after a season of slow plotting and the seeds of war being planted, we finally got our first piece of major action in the Dance of the Dragons in the closing moments of Season 1, with the Greens landing the first major blow after Aemond and Vhagar killed Lucerys and Arrax in a dragon battle in the skies over Storm's End. While accidental, the death of Lucerys all but assured an all-out war between the Blacks and the Greens, with a steely Rhaenyra looking into the camera to let us know she means business. The House of the Dragon team knew how important this scene would be in terms of the story, but actually bringing it to life is a different beast in itself. That's why they went looking for inspiration in a perhaps surprising place: How to Train Your Dragon. Now, while both How to Train Your Dragon and House of the Dragon have dragons and dragon riders, the similarities basically end there, as to be honest, I don't remember murder, incest, or foot fetishes in How to Train Your Dragon. It would probably have been a very different movie if it did. But House of the Dragon director Greg Yaitanes said that he watched How to Train Your Dragon to prepare for the first dragon fight of the series. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, he said, "In preparation, I watched the first How to Train Your Dragon because Roger Deakins was the visual consultant on that. So that, cinematically, was going to be really appealing. In fact, the fight sequence was so similar to How to Train Your Dragon that he actually had to make some changes to the sequence." Yaitanes also admitted that Spielberg's classic Jurassic Park was also an influence, saying, "I went back to the original Jurassic Park because there was a sense of scale to the dinosaurs that I don't think any of the subsequent films ever recaptured." While Lucerys' death is definitely the most major death to take place in the dance, at the moment anyway, the first blood to be spilled was that of Lord Beesbury, who went out in quite horrific fashion, having his face smashed against the balls of the small council members by Sir Criston Cole. His death does take place in the book at a similar time, but it is much more enigmatic, with some saying he died in prison, while others say he was thrown from a window by Sir Criston and impaled on the spikes below, which is quite a way to go. While for non-book readers it was a shocking moment in the episode, it was actually foreshadowed in the scene. While the other members of the small council were wearing the greens of their faction, Lord Beesbury was instead wearing the black and red of House Targaryen, which ultimately aligned him with Rhaenyra and her cause, and sealed his grisly fate. Also, was it him that was having trouble with the stones earlier on in the season, or am I misremembering that? Now, it wouldn't be a Game of Thrones project without a scheming Lannister, now would it? In that very same small council meeting where Lord Beesbury died, we saw Tyland Lannister get to scheming, and everything he says sets up major plot points, one of which bears fruit in the very next episode. Lord Tyland warns the council that Storm's End, which is referred to as an important seat throughout the season, and who had been sworn to Rhaenyra and had connections to Rhaenys through blood, could be an issue, but he mentions that Lord Boros has 4 daughters. This sets up the dragon battle in the next episode, as he is suggesting that Aemond be betrothed to one of the Baratheon daughters before Rhaenyra can sway them to join the Black faction. He also says that he will divide the crown's wealth, which may seem like a throwaway line in the moment, but it actually bears much more significance. Without going into spoilers, in the book, Lord Tyland decides to split the crown's wealth up and keep it out of King's Landing, to keep it away from Rhaenyra if she were ever to take the capital, and essentially bankrupt the opposing faction. Crowns became a more important symbol than the throne itself during the season, with Aegon being coronated with the crown of Aegon the Conqueror to associate him with one of the most powerful men in the Targaryen family, while Rhaenyra is coronated on Dragonstone with the crown of her father Viserys, after it was smuggled out of King's Landing by Eric. No, wait, Arik? No. Wait, is it Eric? It is Eric. Or is it Arik? No, Emma! Damn, I'm turning into Viserys. Yeah, it's Eric. Yeah, definitely Eric. Anyway, while Aegon the Conqueror's might be the more striking of the two crowns, with its dark features being much more intimidating, Viserys' custom crown is much more fitting for the most peaceful man who just wanted the kids to shut up and stop fighting so he could play with his models. This is represented by the sigils that can be seen around the crown. While the Targaryen crest takes pride and place in the center, the sigils of the other major houses in Westeros, such as houses Stark, Lannister, Baratheon, Tyrell, Tully, Martell, and Arryn, can be seen around the crown. This represents represents harmony and the desire to keep the status quo in the era of King Viserys, all of which has now gone out of the window with the now commenced civil war. Speaking of Viserys though, the last time we see him ascend the Iron Throne, he is wearing a sigil with golden dragons on it, instead of his typical red ones. This can be seen as foreshadowing Aegon's impending rule, as his personal crest is that of the Golden Dragon, which is a reference to his dragon Sunfire. In the finale, as Daemon and Otto have one of their traditional dramatic meetings on the Dragonstone Bridge, Otto offers Rhaenyra terms that would allow her to keep Dragonstone and Driftmark if she were to swear fealty to her half-brother. While Rhaenyra deliberates on the offer, Daemon, who has been hungry for a war since we first met him, rejects the offer out of hand, saying, "I would rather feed my sons to the dragons than have them carry shields and cups for your drunken usurper blank of a king." Now, this is less of a bold claim when you realize that Daemon doesn't have any sons through his marriage with Rhaenyra, but to be fair to him, he has raised Jace, Lucerys, and Joffrey for 6 years now, so he sees them as his own sons. What Daemon didn't realize, though, was that he was essentially foreshadowing Luke's fate, as lo and behold, he gets fed as a tasty snack to Vhagar at the end of the episode. Maybe we have another dragon dreamer in our midst. Also, speaking of Daemon, just in case you missed it, the dragon he went to commune with in the finale was Vermithor, King Jaehaerys I Targaryen's fearsome 100-year-old dragon, who, while not as big as Vhagar, is one of the largest dragons around. Something we have covered in these videos already is the prophetic yet cryptic visions of Queen Helaena, who predicted the beast beneath the boards, Aemond losing his eye, and the dance itself. But it's not just her dialogue that is important, but her crafts as well. The scene we are talking about is in the Green Council, when we see her embroidering a spider while spending time with her children. Now, other than this being another bug that she has an affinity for, it has an even deeper meaning. Larys learns that there is a web of little spiders spying on the main characters in order to learn about all of the secrets happening in the castle, and one of these spiders is Alicent's handmaiden, Talia. At the end of the episode, after imprisoning all the servants who knew of the king's death, the cells are set on fire, with Talia being one of the victims. As we have mentioned, the battle, or maybe more appropriately scuffle gone wrong, in the finale was foreshadowed throughout the season, and one instance of this is the word Dohaeris. In Valyrian, Dohaeris means serve, and it was the word that the young boys used to train their dragons earlier on in the season. It is also the same word that both Aemond and Lucerys shout to calm their dragons and stop them from going too far, all of which does not go to plan. In Game of Thrones lore, Valar Dohaeris, which translates as all men must serve, is often said in conjunction with the more commonly known phrase Valar Morghulis, which means all men must die. But anyway, speaking of the scene again, in the show we see that Aemond wasn't actually trying to kill Luke, and his attempt to torment his nephew and to take his eye just got out of hand. But in the book, which is admittedly a verbal history and not to always be taken at face value, Aemond very much meant to kill Luke and even took his head, cut out his eyes, and presented it to Boros Baratheon's daughter, Maris. Speaking of, her part is essentially cut from the scene, as in the book, Maris taunted Aemond, asking him if Lucerys had removed his balls as well as his eye, causing Aemond to lose his temper. Again though, this is told from the perspective of the character Mushroom, who was omitted from the show, and he liked to tell more salacious, but not necessarily inaccurate, versions of the story. Now, it hasn't happened yet, but the show has repeatedly inserted imagery including rodents that relate to one of the most horrifying book events, blood and cheese. We won't go into specifics, but let's say it involves a butcher and a rat catcher, where the nicknames blood and cheese come from, and a murder. We see a reference to blood and cheese during the wedding of Rhaenyra and Laenor, where a rat feasts on the blood of Laenor's recently murdered lover, Joffrey Lonmouth, which seems too much of a coincidence to not be a reference. As we have covered in another video, the opening credits of House of the Dragon is a Targaryen family tree which follows the flow of succession through a river of blood, all with the backdrop of a model that looks very similar to the one of old Valyria, crafted by Viserys. In fact, one of the models is almost certainly Valyria before the Doom, and seeing as that is the Targaryen homelands, it makes sense to follow the family from their roots before landing in Westeros. In episode 8 though, smoke can be seen coming from that model. Now that can be seen as a reference to the Doom itself, but seeing as this is the last episode featuring King Viserys before his death, it could be foreboding his demise. One of the most striking characters in the season is that of the Crabfeeder, who took over the Stepstones after being funded by the Triarchy and causing real problems to Daemon and the Sea Snake. But one thing that is seemingly not mentioned about the Crabfeeder is that he suffers from one of the most dangerous diseases known in Game of Thrones lore, grayscale. Admittedly, from his appearance, that is no surprise, but one detail you might have missed is that in the process of killing him, Daemon may have been exposed to the disease, which, as fans know, can kill you slowly but very surely. And finally, here is a little bonus one for you. When it comes to names in the Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon world, they can be pretty confusing, and they have caught us out from time to time. But there are some easier ones, like Dick and Manwoody, but that's me being childish. The other easier names to remember are the references to pop culture characters. We've already mentioned the Muppets and Sesame Street character names, Elmo, Kermit, Grover, and Oscar in other videos, but one we haven't mentioned is Rhaenyra Targaryen's dragon, which is called Syrax, who just happens to share his name with the character from the Mortal Kombat video game franchise, Cyrax.